in which a house is built at Pooh Corner for Eeyore. One day, when Pooh Bear had nothing else to do, he thought he would do something, so he went round to Piglet's house to see what Piglet was doing. It was still snowing as he stumped over the white forest track, and he expected to find Piglet warming his toes in front of his fire, but to his surprise he saw that the door was open, and the more he looked inside, the more Piglet wasn't there.
"He's out," said Pooh sadly. "That's what he is. He's not in. I shall have to go a fast-thinking walk by myself. Bother."
But first he thought he would knock very loudly, just to make quite sure. While he waited for Piglet not to answer, he jumped up and down to keep warm, and a hum came suddenly into his head, which seemed to him a good hum, such as is hummed, hopefully, to others.
"The more it snows, tiddly-bum, the more it goes, tiddly-bum, the more it goes, tiddly-bum, I'm snowing, and nobody knows, tiddly-bum, how cold my toes, tiddly-bum, how cold my toes, tiddly-bum, are going." "So, what I'll do," said Pooh, "is I'll do this. I'll just go home first and see what the time is, and perhaps I'll put a muffler round my neck, and then I'll go and see Eeyore and sing it to him."
He hurried back to his own house, and his mind was so busy on the way with the hum that he was getting ready for Eeyore that when he suddenly saw Piglet sitting in his best armchair, he could only stand there rubbing his head and wondering whose house he was in.
"Oh, Piglet," he said, "I thought you were out."
"No," said Piglet.
"It's you who are out, Pooh." "So it was," said Pooh. "I knew one of us was."
He looked up at his clock, which had stopped at 5 minutes to 11 some weeks ago.
"Nearly 11 o'clock, said Pooh happily. "You're just in time for a little smackerel of something."
He put his head in the cupboard.
"And then we'll go out, Piglet, and sing my song to Eeyore."
"Which song, Pooh?"
"The one we're going to sing to Eeyore," explained Pooh.
The clock was still saying 5 minutes to 11 when Pooh and Piglet set out on their way half an hour later. The wind had dropped, and the snow, tired of rushing round in circles trying to catch itself up, now fluttered gently down until it found a place on which to rest. And sometimes the place was Pooh's nose, and sometimes it wasn't. And in a little while Piglet was wearing a white muffler round his neck, and feeling more snowy behind the ears than he had ever felt before.
"Pooh,"
he said at last, and a little timidly, because he didn't want Pooh to think he was giving in,
"I was just wondering,
how would it be if we went home now and practised your song and then sang it to Eeyore tomorrow? Or the next day when we happen to see him?"
"That's a very good idea, Piglet," said Pooh. "We'll practice it now as we go along, but it's no good going home to practice it, because it's a special outdoor song which is to be sung in the snow."
"Are you sure?" asked Piglet anxiously.
"Well, you'll see, Piglet, when you listen, because this is how it begins. The more it snows, tiddly-bum."
"Tiddly what?"
said Piglet.
"Pom," said Pooh. "I put that in to make it more hummy. The more it goes, tiddly-bum, the more—"
"Didn't you say snows?"
"Yes, that was before."
"Before the tiddly-bum?"
"It was a different tiddly-bum," said Pooh, feeling rather muddled now. "I'll sing it to you properly, and then you'll see."
So he sang it again.
The more it snows, tiddly-bum, the more it goes, tiddly-bum, the more it goes, tiddly-bum, I'm snowing, and nobody knows, tiddly-bum, how cold my toes, tiddly-bum, how cold my toes, tiddly-bum, are going.
He sang it like that, which is much the best way of singing it, and when he had finished he waited for Piglet to say that of all the outdoor hums for snowy weather he had ever heard, this was the best. And after thinking the matter out carefully, Piglet said,
"Pooh," he said solemnly, "it isn't the toes so much as the ears."
By this time they were getting near Eeyore's gloomy place, which was where he lived, and as it was still very snowy behind Piglet's ears, and he was getting tired of it, they turned into a little pine wood and sat down on the gate which led into it. They were out of the snow now, but it was very cold, and to keep themselves warm they sang Pooh's song right through 6 times, Piglet doing the tiddly-poms, and Pooh doing the rest of it, and both of them thumping on top of the gate with pieces of stick at the proper places. And in a little while they felt much warmer, and were able to talk again.
"I've been thinking," said Pooh, "and what I've been thinking is this. I've been thinking about Eeyore." "What about Eeyore?" "Well, poor Eeyore has nowhere to live." "No, he has," said Piglet. "You have a house, Piglet, and I have a house, and they're very good houses. And Christopher Robin has a house, and Owl and Kangaroo and Rabbit have houses, and even Rabbit's friends and relations have houses, or somethings. But poor Eeyore has nothing. So what I've been thinking is, let's build him a house." "That," said Piglet, "is a grand idea. Where shall we build it?" "We will build it here," said Pooh, "just by this wood, out of the wind, because this is where I thought of it. We will call this Pooh Corner, and we will build an Eeyore house with sticks at Pooh Corner for Eeyore." "There was a heap of sticks on the other side of the wood," said Piglet. "I saw them, lots and lots, all piled up." "Thank you, Piglet," said Pooh. "What you have just said will be a great help to us, and because of it I could call this place Pooh and Piglet Corner if Pooh Corner didn't sound better, which it does, being smaller and more like a corner. Come along."
So they got down off the gate and went round the other side of the wood to fetch the sticks. Christopher Robin had spent the morning indoors going to Africa and back, and he'd just got off the boat and was wondering what it was like outside, when who should come knocking at the door but Eeyore. "Hello, Eeyore," said Christopher Robin as he opened the door and came out. "How are you?"
"It's snowing still," said Eeyore gloomily.
"So it is."
"And freezing."
"Is it?"
"Yes," said Eeyore. "However," he said, brightening up a little, "we haven't had an earthquake lately."
"What's the matter, Eeyore?"
"Nothing, Christopher Robin, nothing important. I suppose you haven't seen a house or whatnot anywhere about?"
"What sort of house?"
"Just a house."
"Who lives there?"
"I do. At least I thought I did, but I suppose I don't after all. We can't all have houses."
"But Eeyore, I didn't know. I always thought—"
"I don't know how it is, Christopher Robin, but what with all this snow and one thing and another, not to mention icicles and such like, it isn't so hot in my field about 3 o'clock in the morning as some people think it is. It isn't close, if you know what I mean, not so as to be uncomfortable. It isn't stuffy. In fact, Christopher Robin," he went on in a loud whisper, "quite between ourselves, and don't tell anybody, it's cold."
"Oh, Eeyore."
"And I said to myself, the others will be sorry if I'm getting myself all cold. They haven't got brains, any of them, only grey fluff that's blown into their heads by mistake, and they don't think. But if it goes on snowing for another 6 weeks or so, one of them will begin to say to himself, 'Eeyore can't be so very much too hot about 3 o'clock in the morning.' And then it will get about, and they'll be sorry."
"Oh, Eeyore," said Christopher Robin, feeling very sorry already.
"Oh, I don't mean you, Christopher Robin. You're different. So what it all comes to is that I built myself a house down by my little wood."
"Did you really? How exciting!"
"The really exciting part," said Eeyore in his most melancholy voice, "is that when I left it this morning, it was there, and when I came back, it wasn't. Not at all. Very natural. And it was only Eeyore's house.
But still, I just wondered. Christopher Robin didn't stop to wonder. He was already back in his house, putting on his waterproof hat, his waterproof boots, and his waterproof mackintosh as fast as he could. "We'll go and look for it at once," he called out to Eeyore. "Sometimes," said Eeyore, "when people have quite finished taking a person's house, there are one or two bits they don't want and are rather glad for the person to take back, if you know what I mean. So I thought if we just went—" "Oh, come on," said Christopher Robin. And off they hurried. And in a very little time they got to the corner of the field by the side of the pine wood, where Eeyore's house wasn't any longer. "There," said Eeyore. "Not a stick of it left. Of course, I've still got all this snow to do what I like with. One mustn't complain." But Christopher Robin wasn't listening to Eeyore. He was listening to something else. "Can you hear it?" he asked. "What is it? Somebody laughing? Listen." They both listened, and they heard a deep, gruff voice saying in a singing voice that the more it snowed, the more it went on snowing, and a small, high voice tiddly-pomming in between. "It's Pooh," said Christopher Robin excitedly. "Possibly," said Eeyore. "And Piglet," said Christopher Robin excitedly. "Probably," said Eeyore. "What we want is a trained bloodhound." The words of the song changed suddenly.
"We've finished our house," sang the gruff voice.
Tiddly-pom,
sang the squeaky one.
"It's a beautiful house."
tiddly-pom,
"I wish it were mine."
tiddly-pom.
"Pooh!" shouted Christopher Robin. The singers on the gate stopped suddenly.
"It's Christopher Robin," said Pooh eagerly.
"He's round by the place where we got all those sticks from," said Piglet.
"Come on," said Pooh.
They climbed down their gate and hurried round the corner of the wood, Pooh making welcoming noises all the way.
"Why, here is Eeyore,"
said Pooh when he had finished hugging Christopher Robin, and he nudged Piglet, and Piglet nudged him, and they thought to themselves what a lovely surprise they'd got ready.
"Hello, Eeyore."
"Same to you, Pooh Bear, and twice on Thursdays," said Eeyore gloomily. Before Pooh could say,
"By Thursdays,"
Christopher Robin began to explain the sad story of Eeyore's lost house, and Pooh and Piglet listened, and their eyes seemed to get bigger and bigger.
"Where did you say it was?"
asked Pooh. "Just here," said Eeyore.
"Made of sticks?"
"Yes."
"Ah," said Piglet.
"What?" said Eeyore.
"I just said oh,"
said Piglet nervously, and so as to seem quite at ease he hummed diddly-pom once or twice, in a what shall we do now kind of way.
"You're sure it was a house?" said Pooh. "I mean, you're sure the house was just here?"
"Of course I am," said Eeyore, and he murmured to himself, "No brains at all, some of them." "Why, what's the matter, Pooh?" asked Christopher Robin.
"Well," said Pooh, "the fact is," said Pooh. "Well, the fact is," said Pooh. "You see," said Pooh, "it's like this," said Pooh.
And something seemed to tell him that he wasn't explaining very well, and he nudged Piglet again.
"It's like this,"
said Piglet quickly.
"Only warmer."
he added after deep thought.
"What's warmer?" "The other side of the wood where Eeyore's house is."
"My house?" said Eeyore. "My house was here."
"No," said Piglet firmly. "The other side of the wood."
"Because of being warmer," said Pooh.
"But I ought to know."
"Come and look,"
said Piglet simply, and he led the way.
"There wouldn't be two houses," said Pooh.
"Not so close together." They came round the corner, and there was Eeyore's house, looking as comfy as anything.
"There you are," said Piglet.
"Inside as well as outside,"
said Pooh proudly. Eeyore went inside and came out again. "It's a remarkable thing," he said. "It is my house, and I built it where I said I did. So the wind must have blown it here, and the wind blew it right over the wood and blew it down here, and here it is as good as ever. In fact, better in places."
"Oh, much better,"
said Pooh and Piglet together. "It just shows what can be done by taking a little trouble," said Eeyore. "Do you see, Pooh? Oh, do you see, Piglet? Brains first, and then hard work. Look at it." "That's the way to build a house," said Eeyore proudly. So they left him in it, and Christopher Robin went back to lunch with his friends Pooh and Piglet. And on the way they told him of the awful mistake they had made. And when he had finished laughing, they all sang the outdoor song for snowy weather the rest of the way home. Piglet, who was still not quite sure of his voice, putting in the tiddly-poms again. "And I know it seems easy," said Piglet to himself, "but it isn't everyone who could do it." In which Tigger comes to the forest and has breakfast. Winnie-the-Pooh woke up suddenly in the middle of the night and listened. Then he got out of bed and lit his candle and stumped across the room to see if anybody was trying to get into his honey cupboard. And they weren't. So he stumped back again, blew out his candle, and got into bed. Then he heard the noise again.
"Is that you, Piglet?"
he said. But it wasn't.
"Come in, Christopher Robin,"
he said. But Christopher Robin didn't.
"Tell me about it tomorrow, Eeyore,"
said Pooh sleepily. But the noise went on. Said whatever it was. And Pooh found that he wasn't asleep after all.
"What can it be?" he thought. "There are lots of noises in the forest, but this is a different one. It isn't a growl, and it isn't a purr, and it isn't a bark, and it isn't the noise you make before beginning a piece of poetry. But it's a noise of some kind made by a strange animal, and he's making it outside my door. So I shall get up and ask him not to do it."
Got out of bed and opened his front door.
"Hello,"
said Pooh, in case there was anything outside.
"Hello,"
said whatever it was.
"Oh,"
said Pooh.
"Hello, hello."
"Oh, there you are," said Pooh.
"Hello."
"Hello," said the strange animal, wondering how long this was going on. Pooh was just going to say hello for the fourth time when he thought he wouldn't. So he said,
"Who is it?"
instead. "Me," said a voice.
"Oh,"
said Pooh.
"well, come here."
So whatever it was came here, and in the light of the candle, he and Pooh looked at each other.
"I'm Pooh,"
said Pooh.
"I'm Tigger,"
said Tigger.
"Oh,"
said Pooh, for he'd never seen an animal like this before.
"does Christopher Robin know about you?"
"Of course he does," said Tigger.
"Well," said Pooh, "it's the middle of the night, which is a good time for going to sleep, and tomorrow morning we'll have some honey for breakfast. Do Tiggers like honey?"
"They like everything," said Tigger cheerfully.
"Then if they like going to sleep on the floor, I'll go back to bed," said Pooh, "and we'll do things in the morning. Good night."
And he got back into bed and went fast asleep. When he awoke in the morning, the first thing he saw was Tigger, sitting in front of the glass and looking at himself.
"Hello,"
said Pooh. "Hello," said Tigger. "I've found somebody just like me. I thought I was the only one of them." Pooh got out of bed and began to explain what a looking-glass was. But just as he was getting to the interesting part, Tigger said, "Excuse me a moment, but there's something climbing your table." And with one loud he jumped at the end of the tablecloth, pulled it to the ground, wrapped himself up in it 3 times, rolled to the other end of the room, and after a terrible struggle got his head into the daylight again and said cheerfully, "Have I won?"
"That's my tablecloth,"
said Pooh as he began to unwind Tigger. "I wondered what it was," said Tigger.
It goes on the table and you put things on it. Then why did it try to bite me when I wasn't looking?"
"I don't think it did," said Pooh. "It tried," said Tigger, "but I was too quick for it."
Pooh put the cloth back on the table, and he put a large honey pot on the cloth, and they sat down to breakfast. And as soon as they sat down, Tigger took a large mouthful of honey, and he looked up at the ceiling with his head on one side, and made exploring noises with his tongue, and considering noises. And what have we got here? Noises. And then he said, in a very decided voice, "Tiggers don't like honey."
"Oh," said
Pooh, and tried to make it sound sad and regretful.
"I thought they liked everything."
"Everything except honey," said Tigger.
Pooh felt rather pleased about this, and said that as soon as he had finished his own breakfast he would take Tigger round to Piglet's house, and Tigger could try some of Piglet's acorns.
"Thank you, Pooh," said Tigger, "because acorns is really what Tiggers like best."
So after breakfast they went round to see Piglet, and Pooh explained as they went that Piglet was a very small animal who didn't like bouncing, and asked Tigger not to be too bouncy just at first. And Tigger, who had been hiding behind trees and jumping out on Pooh's shadow when it wasn't looking, said that Tiggers were only bouncy before breakfast, and that as soon as they had had a few acorns they became quiet and refined. So by and by they knocked at the door of Piglet's house.
"Hello, Pooh," said Piglet.
"Oh, Piglet, this is Tigger."
"Oh, is it?" said Piglet, and he edged round the other side of the table. "I thought Tiggers were smaller than that."
"Not the big ones," said Tigger. "They like acorns," said Pooh. "So that's what we've come for, because poor Tigger hasn't had any breakfast yet."
Piglet pushed the bowl of acorns towards Tigger and said,
"Help yourself."
Then he got close up to Pooh and felt much braver and said,
"So you're Tigger? Whew. Well,
in a careless sort of voice. But Tigger said nothing because his mouth was full of acorns. After a long munching noise, he said,
And
when Pooh and Piglet said, "What?" he said,
"Squirrel,
and went outside for a moment. When he came back, he said firmly,
Tiggers don't like acorns." "But you said they liked everything except honey," said Pooh. "Everything except honey and acorns," explained Tigger.
When he heard this, Pooh said,
"Oh, I see."
And Piglet, who was rather glad that Tiggers didn't like acorns, said,
"What about thistles?"
"Thistles," said Tigger, "is what Tiggers like best."
"Then let's go along and see Eeyore," said Piglet. So the three of them went, and after they'd walked and walked and walked, they came to the part of the forest where Eeyore was.
"Hello, Eeyore," said Pooh. "This is Tigger."
"What is?" said Eeyore.
"This,"
explained Pooh and Piglet together, and Tigger smiled his happiest smile and said nothing. Eeyore walked all round Tigger one way, and then turned and walked all round him the other way.
"What did you say it was?" he asked.
"Tigger."
"Oh,"
said Eeyore.
"He's just come,"
explained Piglet.
"Oh," said Eeyore again.
He thought for a long time, and then said,
"When is he going?"
Pooh explained to Eeyore that Tigger was a great friend of Christopher Robin's who had come to stay in the forest, and Piglet explained to Tigger that he mustn't mind what Eeyore said, because he was always gloomy. And Eeyore explained to Piglet that, on the contrary, he was feeling particularly cheerful this morning, and Tigger explained to anybody who was listening that he hadn't had any breakfast yet.
"I knew there was something," said Pooh. "Tiggers always eat thistles, so that's why we came to see you, Eeyore." Don't mention it, Pooh.
Oh, Eeyore, I didn't mean that I didn't want to see you.
Quite. But your new stripy friend, naturally he wants his breakfast. What did you say his name was?
Tigger.
Then come this way, Tigger.
Eeyore led the way to the most thistly-looking patch of thistles that ever was, and waved a hoof at it.
A little patch I was keeping for my birthday, he said. But after all, what are birthdays? Here today and gone tomorrow. Help yourself, Tigger.
Tigger thanked him and looked a little anxiously at Pooh.
Are these really thistles?
He whispered.
Yes, said Pooh. What Tiggers like best?
That's right, said Pooh. I see, said Tigger. So he took a large mouthful, and he gave a large crunch.
Ow!
Said Tigger. He sat down and put his paw in his mouth.
What's the matter?
Asked Pooh.
Hot!
Mumbled Tigger.
Your friend, said Eeyore, appears to have bitten on a bee.
Pooh's friend stopped shaking his head to get the prickles out, and explained that Tiggers didn't like thistles.
Then why bend a perfectly good one? Asked Eeyore.
But you said,
began Pooh.
You said that Tiggers liked everything except honey and acorns. And thistles,
said Tigger, who was now running round in circles with his tongue hanging out. Pooh looked at him sadly.
What are we going to do?
He asked Piglet. Piglet knew the answer to that, and he said at once that they must go and see Christopher Robin.
You'll find him with Kanga,
said Eeyore. He came close to Pooh and said in a loud whisper,
Could you ask your friend to do his exercises somewhere else? I shall be having lunch directly, and I don't want it bounced on just before I begin. A trifling matter, and fussy of me. But we all have our little ways.
Pooh nodded solemnly and called to Tigger.
Come along and we'll go and see Kanga. She's sure to have lots of breakfast for you.
Tigger finished his last circle and came up to Pooh and Piglet.
Hot,
he explained with a large and friendly smile.
Come on!
And he rushed off. Pooh and Piglet walked slowly after him, and as they walked, Piglet said nothing because he couldn't think of anything, and Pooh said nothing because he was thinking of a poem. And when he had thought of it, he began.
What shall we do about poor little Tigger? If he never eats nothing, he'll never get bigger. He doesn't like honey and acorns and thistles because of the taste and because of the bristles. And all the good things which an animal likes have the wrong sort of swallow or too many spikes.
He's quite big enough anyhow, said Piglet.
He isn't really very big.
Well, he seems so. Pooh was thoughtful when he heard this, and then he murmured to himself.
But whatever his weight in pounds, shillings, and ounces, he always seems bigger because of his bounces. And that's the whole poem, he said. Do you like it, Piglet?
All except the shillings, said Piglet. I don't think they ought to be there.
They wanted to come in after pounds, explained Pooh, so I let them. It's the best way to write poetry, letting things come.
Oh, I didn't know, said Piglet. Tigger had been bouncing in front of them all the time, turning round every now and then to ask,
Is this the way?
And now at last they came in sight of Kanga's house, and there was Christopher Robin. Tigger rushed up to him. Oh, there you are, Tigger, said Christopher Robin. I knew you'd be somewhere.
I've been finding things in the forest, said Tigger importantly. I found a Pooh and a Piglet and an Eeyore, but I can't find any breakfast.
Pooh and Piglet came up and hugged Christopher Robin and explained what had been happening.
Don't you know what Tigger's like?
Asked Pooh. Why, I expect if I thought very hard I should, said Christopher Robin. But I thought Tigger knew.
I do, said Tigger. Everything there is in the world except honey and acorns and, what were those hot things called?
Thistles.
Yes, and those.
"Oh, well then, Kanga can give you some breakfast." So they went into Kanga's house, and when Roo had said, "Hello, Pooh," and "Hello, Piglet," once, and "Hello, Tigger," twice, because she had never seen it before and it sounded funny, he told Kanga what they wanted, and Kanga said very kindly, "Well, look in my cupboard, Tigger dear, and see what you like," because she knew at once that however big Tigger seemed to be, he wanted as much kindness as Roo.
"Shall I take a look too?"
said Pooh, who was beginning to feel a little 11 o'clockish, and he found a small tin of condensed milk, and something seemed to tell him that Tiggers didn't like this, so he took it into a corner by itself and went with it to see that nobody interrupted it. But the more Tigger put his nose into this and his paw into that, the more things he found which Tiggers didn't like. And when he had found everything in the cupboard and couldn't eat any of it, he said to Kanga, "What happens now?" But Kanga and Christopher Robin and Piglet were all standing round Roo, watching him have his extract of malt. And Roo was saying, "Must I?" And Kanga was saying, "Now, Roo dear, you remember what you promised." "What is it?" whispered Tigger to Piglet. "His strengthening medicine," said Piglet. "He hates it." So Tigger came closer, and he leant over the back of Roo's chair, and suddenly he put out his tongue and took one large gollop. And, with a sudden jump of surprise, Kanga said, "Ow!" and then clutched at the spoon again just as it was disappearing and pulled it safely back out of Tigger's mouth. But the extract of malt had gone. "Tigger dear," said Kanga. "He's taken my medicine! He's taken my medicine! He's taken my medicine!" sang Roo happily, thinking it was a tremendous joke. Then Tigger looked up at the ceiling and closed his eyes, and his tongue went round and round his chops in case he had left any outside, and a peaceful smile came over his face, and he said, "So that's what Tigger's like." Which explains why he always lived at Kanga's house afterwards, and had extract of malt for breakfast, dinner, and tea. And sometimes, when Kanga thought he wanted strengthening, he had a spoonful or two of Roo's breakfast after meals as medicine. "But I think," said Piglet to Pooh, "that he's been strengthened quite enough." In which it is shown that Tiggers don't climb trees. One day when Pooh was thinking, he thought he would go and see Eeyore, because he hadn't seen him since yesterday. And as he walked through the heather, singing to himself, he suddenly remembered that he hadn't seen Owl since the day before yesterday, so he thought he would just look in at the 100 Acre Wood on the way and see if Owl was at home. Well, he went on singing, until he came to the part of the stream where the stepping stones were, and when he was in the middle of the third stone, he began to wonder how Kanga and Roo and Tigger were getting on, because they all lived together in a different part of the forest, and he thought,
"I haven't seen Roo for a long time, and if I don't see him today, it will be a still longer time."
So he sat down on the stone in the middle of the stream and sang another verse of his song, while he wondered what to do. The other verse of the song was like this.
"I could spend a happy morning seeing Roo. I could spend a happy morning being Pooh, for it doesn't seem to matter if I don't get any fatter, and I don't get any fatter what I do."
The sun was so delightfully warm, and the stone, which had been sitting in it for a long time, was so warm too, that Pooh had almost decided to go on being Pooh in the middle of the stream for the rest of the morning when he remembered Rabbit.
"Rabbit," said Pooh to himself. "I like talking to Rabbit. He talks about sensible things. He doesn't use long, difficult words like Owl. He uses short, easy words like, 'What about lunch?' and 'Help yourself, Pooh.' I suppose, really, I ought to go and see Rabbit."
Which made him think of another verse.
"Oh, I like this way of talking, yes I do. It's the nicest way of talking, just for two. And help yourself with rabbit, though it may become a habit, is a pleasant sort of habit for Pooh.
So when he had sung this, he got up off his stone, walked back across the stream, and set off for Rabbit's house. But he hadn't got far before he began to say to himself, "Yes, but suppose Rabbit is out, or suppose I get stuck in his front door again, coming out as I did once when his front door wasn't big enough. Because I know I'm not getting fatter, but his front door may be getting thinner. So wouldn't it be better if—" And all the time he was saying things like this, he was going more and more westerly, without thinking, until suddenly he found himself at his own front door again. And it was 11 o'clock, which was time for a little something. Half an hour later he was doing what he had always really meant to do. He was stumping off to Piglet's house. And as he walked, he wiped his mouth with the back of his paw and sang rather a fluffy song through the fur. It went like this.
I could spend a happy morning seeing Piglet, and I couldn't spend a happy morning not seeing Piglet, and it doesn't seem to matter if I don't see Owl and Eeyore or any of the others, and I'm not going to see Owl or Eeyore or any of the others, or Christopher Robin.
Written down like this, it doesn't seem a very good song, but coming through pale fawn fluff at about 11:30 on a very sunny morning, it seemed to Pooh to be one of the best songs he'd ever sung. So he went on singing it. Piglet was busy digging a small hole in the ground outside his house.
"Hello, Piglet," said Pooh.
Oh, hello, Pooh,
said Piglet, giving a jump of surprise.
I knew it was you.
"So did I," said Pooh. "What you doing?"
I'm planting a acorn, Pooh, so that it can grow up into a oak tree and have lots of acorns just outside the front door instead of having to walk miles and miles. Do you see, Pooh?"
"Supposing it doesn't," said Pooh.
"It will, because Christopher Robin says it will, so that's why I'm planting it."
"Well," said Pooh, "if I plant a honeycomb outside my house, it will grow up into a beehive."
Piglet wasn't quite sure about this.
"Or a piece of honeycomb," said Pooh, "so as not to waste too much. Only then I might only get a piece of a beehive, and it might be the wrong piece, where the bees were buzzing and not honeying. Oh, bother."
Piglet agreed that it would be rather bothering.
"Besides, Pooh, it's a very difficult thing planting unless you know how to do it," he said,
and he put the acorn in the hole he had made, and covered it up with earth, and jumped on it.
"I do know," said Pooh, "because Christopher Robin gave me a nasturtium seed, and I planted it, and I'm going to have nasturtiums all over the front door."
"I thought they were called nasturtiums," said Piglet timidly,
as he went on jumping.
"No," said Pooh, "not these. These are called nasturtiums."
When Piglet had finished jumping, he wiped his paws on his front and said,
"What shall we do now?"
And Pooh said,
"Well, let's go and see Kangaroo and Tigger."
And Piglet said,
"Yes, let's,"
because he was still a little anxious about Tigger, who was a very bouncy animal, with a way of saying "how do you do," which always left your ears full of sand, even after Kangaroo had said, "Gently, Tigger, dear," and had helped you up again. So they set off for Kangaroo's house. Now it happened that Kangaroo had felt rather motherly that morning and wanted to count things, like Roo's vests and how many pieces of soap there were left and the 2 clean spots in Tigger's feeder. So she had them sent out with a packet of watercress sandwiches for Roo and a packet of extract of malt sandwiches for Tigger to have a nice long morning in the forest, not getting into mischief. And off they'd gone. And as they went, Tigger told Roo, who wanted to know, all about the things that Tiggers could do.
"Can they fly?"
asked Roo.
"Yes," said Tigger. "They're very good flyers. Tiggers are extraordinarily good flyers."
"Oh," said Roo. "Can they fly as well as Owl?"
"Yes," said Tigger. "Only they don't want to."
"Why don't they want to?"
"Well, they just don't like it somehow." Roo couldn't understand this because he thought it would be lovely to be able to fly, but Tigger said it was difficult to explain to anybody who wasn't a Tigger himself.
"Well," said Roo, "can they jump as far as Kangas?"
"Yes," said Tigger, "when they want to."
"I love jumping," said Roo. "Let's see who can jump farthest, you and me."
"I can," said Tigger, "but we mustn't stop now or we shall be late."
"Late for what?"
"For whatever we want to be in time for," said Tigger, hurrying on. In a little while they came to the 6 pine trees.
"I can swim," said Roo. "I fell into the river and I swimmed." "Can Tigger swim?"
"Of course they can. Tiggers can do everything."
"Can they climb trees better than a Pooh?"
asked Roo, stopping under the tallest pine tree and looking up at it.
"Climbing trees is what they do best," said Tigger. "Much better than Poohs."
"Could they climb this one?"
"They're always climbing trees like that," said Tigger. "Up and down all day."
"Oh, Tigger, are they really?"
"I'll show you," said Tigger bravely, "and you can sit on my back and watch me."
For all the things which he had said Tigger could do, the only one he felt really certain about suddenly was climbing trees.
"Oh, Tigger! Oh, Tigger! Whoa! Tigger!"
squeaked Roo excitedly. So he sat on Tigger's back, and up they went. And for the first 10 feet, Tigger said happily to himself,
"Up we go!"
and for the next 10 feet he said,
"I always said Tiggers could climb trees."
and for the next 10 feet he said,
"Not that it's easy, mind you."
and for the next 10 feet he said,
"Of course, there's the coming down too, backwards."
and then he said,
"Which will be difficult, unless one fell, when it would be easy."
At the word easy, the branch he was standing on broke suddenly, and he just managed to clutch at the one above him as he felt himself going, and then slowly he got his chin over it, and then one back paw, and then the other, until at last he was sitting on it, breathing very quickly and wishing that he had gone in for swimming instead. Roo climbed off and sat next to him.
"Whee, Tigger!"
he said excitedly.
"Are we at the top?"
"No," said Tigger.
"Are we going to the top?"
"No," said Tigger.
"Oh,"
said Roo rather sadly. Then he went on hopefully.
"That was a lovely bit just now when you pretended we were going to fall plump to the bottom, and we didn't.
"Here, will you do that bit again?"
"No," said Tigger. Roo was silent for a little while, and then he said,
"Shall we eat our sandwiches, Tigger?"
and Tigger said,
"Yes, where are they?"
and Roo said,
"At the bottom of the tree."
and Tigger said,
"I don't think we'd better eat them just yet."
So they didn't. By and by, Pooh and Piglet came along. Pooh was telling Piglet in a singing voice that it didn't seem to matter if he didn't get any fatter, and he didn't think he was getting any fatter what he did, and Piglet was wondering how long it would be before his haycorn came up.
"Look, Pooh," said
Piglet suddenly.
"there's something in one of the pine trees."
"So there is,"
said Pooh, looking up wonderingly.
"There's an animal."
Piglet took Pooh's arm in case Pooh was frightened.
"Is it one of the fiercer animals?"
he said, looking the other way. Pooh nodded.
"It's a jaguar,"
he said.
"What do jugulars do?"
asked Piglet, hoping they wouldn't.
"They hide in the branches of trees and drop on you as you go underneath," said Pooh. "Christopher Robin told me."
"Perhaps we'd better hadn't go underneath, Pooh, in case he dropped and hurt himself."
"They don't hurt themselves," said Pooh. "They're such very good droppers."
Piglet still felt that to be underneath a very good dropper would be a mistake, and he was just going to hurry back for something which he had forgotten when the jaguar called out to them.
"Help! Help!"
it called.
"That's what jagulars always do," said Pooh, much interested. "They call help, help, and then when you look up they drop on you."
"I'm looking down!"
cried Piglet loudly, so as the jagular shouldn't do the wrong thing by accident. Something very excited next to the jagular heard him and squeaked,
"Pooh and Piglet! Pooh and Piglet!"
All of a sudden Piglet felt that it was a much nicer day than he had thought it was, all warm and sunny.
"Pooh!" he cried. "I believe it's Tigger and Roo."
"So it is," said Pooh. "I thought it was a jagular and another jagular."
"Hello, Roo!"
called Piglet.
"What you doing?"
"We can't get down! We can't get down!" cried Roo. "Isn't it fun, Pooh, isn't it fun? Tigger and I are living in a tree like Owl, and we're going to stay here forever and ever. I can see Piglet's house, Piglet, and I can see your house from here. Aren't we high? Hey! Is Owl's house as high up as this?"
"How did you get there, Roo?"
asked Piglet.
"On Tigger's back, and Tiggers can't climb downwards because their tails get in the way, only upwards, and Tigger forgot about that when we started, and he's only just remembered. So we've got to stay here forever and ever, unless we go higher."
"What did you say, Tigger?"
"Oh, Tigger says if we go higher, we shan't be able to see Piglet's house so well, so we're going to stop here."
"Piglet," said Pooh solemnly when he had heard all this, "what shall we do?" And he began to eat Tigger's sandwiches.
"Are they stuck?"
asked Piglet anxiously. Pooh nodded.
"Couldn't you climb up to them?"
"I might, Piglet, and I might bring Roo down on my back, but I couldn't bring Tigger down, so we must think of something else."
And in a thoughtful way he began to eat Roo's sandwiches too. Whether he would have thought of anything before he had finished the last sandwich, I don't know. But he had just got to the last but one, when there was a crackling in the bracken, and Christopher Robin and Eeyore came strolling along together.
"I shouldn't be surprised if it hailed a good deal tomorrow,"
Eeyore was saying.
"Blizzards and what not. Being fine today doesn't mean anything. It has no what's that word? Well, it has none of that. It's just a small piece of weather."
"There's Pooh," said Christopher Robin, who didn't mind much what it did tomorrow, as long as he was out in it. "Hello, Pooh!"
"It's Christopher Robin," said Piglet. "He'll know what to do."
They hurried up to him.
"Oh, Christopher Robin," began Pooh.
"And Eeyore," said Eeyore.
"Tigger and Roo are right up the 6 pine trees, and they can't get down, and
"And I was just saying," put in Piglet, "that if only Christopher Robin—"
"And Eeyore."
"If only you were here, then we could think of something to do."
Christopher Robin looked up at Tigger and Roo and tried to think of something.
"I thought," said Piglet earnestly, "that if Eeyore stood at the bottom of the tree, and if Pooh stood on Eeyore's back, and if I stood on Pooh's shoulders—"
"And if Eeyore's back snapped suddenly, then we could all laugh. Ha, ha! Amusing in a quiet way," said Eeyore, "but not really helpful."
"Well," said Piglet meekly, "I thought—"
"Would it break your back, Eeyore?"
asked Pooh, very much surprised.
"That's what would be so interesting, Pooh, not being quite sure till afterwards."
Pooh said, "Oh," and they all began to think again.
"I've got an idea!"
cried Christopher Robin suddenly.
"Listen to this, Piglet," said Eeyore, "and then you'll know what we're trying to do."
"I'll take off my tunic, and we'll each hold a corner. Then Roo and Tigger can jump into it, and it will be all soft and bouncy for them, and they won't hurt themselves."
"Getting Tigger down," said Eeyore, "and not hurting anybody. Keep those 2 ideas in your head, Piglet, and you'll be all right."
But Piglet wasn't listening. He was so agog at the thought of seeing Christopher Robin's blue braces again. He had only seen them once before when he was much younger, and being a little overexcited by them, he had to go to bed half an hour earlier than usual, and he had always wondered since if they were really as blue and as bracing as he had thought them. So when Christopher Robin took his tunic off, and they were, he felt quite friendly to Eeyore again, and held the corner of the tunic next to him, and smiled happily at him. And Eeyore whispered back,
"I'm not saying there won't be an accident now, mind you. They're funny things, accidents. You never have them till you're having them."
When Roo understood what he had to do, he was wildly excited and cried out,
Tigger! Tigger, we're going to jump! Look at me jumping, Tigger, like flying my jumping will be. Can Tiggers do it?
and he squeaked out,
I'm coming, Christopher Robin!
and he jumped straight into the middle of the tunic, and he was going so fast that he bounced up again, almost as high as where he was before, and went on bouncing and saying,
Phew!
for quite a long time, and then at last he stopped and said,
Oh, lovely!
and they put him on the ground.
Come on, Tigger!
He called out,
It's easy!
but Tigger was holding on to the branch and saying to himself,
It's all very well for jumping animals like kangaroos, but it's quite different for swimming animals like diggers.
and he thought of himself floating on his back down a river, or striking out from one island to another, and he felt that was really the life for a Tigger.
Come along, called Christopher Robin. You'll be all right. Just wait a moment, said Tigger nervously. Small piece of bark in my eye.
And he moved slowly along his branch.
Come on, it's easy,
squeaked Roo, and suddenly Tigger found how easy it was.
Arr!
He shouted as the tree flew past him.
Look out!
cried Christopher Robin to the others. There was a crash, and a tearing noise, and a confused heap of everybody on the ground. Christopher Robin and Pooh and Piglet picked themselves up first, and then they picked Tigger up, and underneath everybody else was Eeyore. "Oh, Eeyore!" cried Christopher Robin. "Are you hurt?" And he felt him rather anxiously, and dusted him and helped him to stand up again. Eeyore said nothing for a long time, and then he said,
"Is Tigger there?"
Tigger was there, feeling bouncy again already. "Yes," said Christopher Robin. "Tigger's here."
"Well, just thank him for me," said Eeyore.
In which Pooh invents a new game, and Eeyore joins in. By the time it came to the edge of the forest, the stream had grown up, so that it was almost a river, and being grown up, it did not run and jump and sparkle along as it used to do when it was younger, but moved more slowly. For it knew now where it was going, and it said to itself, "There is no hurry. We shall get there some day." But all the little streams higher up in the forest went this way and that quickly, eagerly, having so much to find out before it was too late. There was a broad track, almost as broad as a road, leading from the outland to the forest, but before it could come to the forest, it had to cross this river. So where it crossed there was a wooden bridge, almost as broad as a road, with wooden rails on each side of it. Christopher Robin could just get his chin to the top rail, if he wanted to, but it was more fun to stand on the bottom rail, so that he could lean right over and watch the river slipping slowly away beneath him. Pooh could get his chin onto the bottom rail, if he wanted to, but it was much more fun to lie down and get his head under it, and watch the river slipping slowly away beneath him. And this was the only way in which Piglet and Roo could watch the river at all, because they were too small to reach the bottom rail. So they would lie down and watch it, and it slipped away very slowly, being in no hurry to get there. One day, when Pooh was walking towards this bridge, he was trying to make up a piece of poetry about fir cones, because there they were, lying about on each side of him, and he felt singy. So he picked a fir cone up and looked at it and said to himself, "This is a very good fir cone, and something ought to rhyme to it." But he couldn't think of anything. And then this came into his head suddenly.
Here is a mystery about a little fir tree. Owl says it's his tree, and Ganga says it's her tree. Which doesn't make sense, said Pooh, because Ganga doesn't live in a tree.
He had just come to the bridge, and not looking where he was going, he tripped over something, and the fir cone jerked out of his paw into the river.
Bother,
said Pooh, as it floated slowly under the bridge, and he went back to get another fir cone, which had a rhyme to it. But then he thought he would just look at the river instead, because it was a peaceful sort of day, so he lay down and looked at it, and it slipped slowly away beneath him. And suddenly there was his fir cone slipping away too.
That's funny, said Pooh. I dropped it on the other side, said Pooh, and it came out on this side. Wonder if it would do it again.
And he went back for some more fir cones. It did. It kept on doing it. Then he dropped two in at once, and leant over the bridge to see which one of them would come out first. And one of them did. But as they were both the same size, he didn't know if it was the one which he wanted to win, or the other one. So the next time he dropped one big one, and one little one. And the big one came out first, which was what he said it would do. And the little one came out last, which is what he said it would do. So he had won twice. And when he went home for tea, he had won 36 and lost 28, which meant that he had, you take 28 from 36, and that's what he was, instead of the other way round. And that was the beginning of the game called Poohsticks, which Pooh invented, and which he and his friends used to play at the edge of the forest. But they played with sticks instead of fir cones, because they were easier to mark. Now one day, Pooh and Piglet and Rabbit and Roo were all playing Poohsticks together. They dropped their sticks in when Rabbit said, "Go!" And then they had hurried across to the other side of the bridge, and now they were all leaning over the edge, waiting to see whose stick would come out first. But it was a long time coming, because the river was very lazy that day, and hardly seemed to mind if it didn't ever get there at all. "I can see mine!" cried Roo. "Oh, I can't. It's something else." "Can you see yours, Piglet?" "I thought I could see mine, but I couldn't." Oh, there it is." No, it isn't." "Can you see yours, Pooh?"
No, said Pooh.
"I expect my stick's stuck," said Roo. "Rabbit, my stick's stuck. Is your stick stuck, Piglet?" "They always take longer than you think," said Rabbit. "How long do you think they'll take?" asked Roo.
"I can see yours, Piglet,"
said Pooh suddenly. "Mine's a sort of greyish one," said Piglet, not daring to lean too far over in case he fell in.
"Yes, that's what I can see. It's coming over onto my side."
Rabbit leant over further than ever, looking for his, and Roo wriggled up and down, calling out, "Come on, stick, 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 stick!" And Piglet got very excited because his was the only one which had been seen, and that meant that he was winning.
"It's coming," said Pooh.
"Are you sure it's mine?" squeaked Piglet excitedly.
"Yes, because it's grey, a big grey one.
"Here it comes, a very big grey—"
Oh, no, it isn't. It's
Eeyore."
And out floated Eeyore.
"Eeyore!"
cried everybody. Looking very calm, very dignified, with his legs in the air, came Eeyore from beneath the bridge.
"It's Eeyore!"
cried Roo, terribly excited.
"Is that so?" said Eeyore, getting caught up by a little eddy and turning slowly round 3 times. "I wondered."
"I didn't know you were playing," said Roo.
"I'm not," said Eeyore.
"Eeyore, what are you doing there?" said Rabbit.
"I'll give you 3 guesses, Rabbit. Digging holes in the ground? Wrong. Leaping from branch to branch of a young oak tree? Wrong. Waiting for somebody to help me out of the river? Right. Give Rabbit time, and he'll always get the answer."
"But Eeyore," said Pooh in distress, "what can we, how shall we, Do you think that we—"
Yes, said Eeyore. One of those things would be just the thing. Thank you, Pooh.
"He's going round and round," said Roo, much impressed.
And why not? Said Eeyore coldly.
"I can swim too," said Roo proudly.
Not round and round, said Eeyore. It's much more difficult. I didn't want to come swimming at all today, he went on, revolving slowly. But if, when in, I decide to practice a slight circular movement from right to left, or perhaps I should say, he added as he got into another eddy, from left to right, just as it happens to occur to me, it's nobody's business but my own.
There was a moment's silence while everybody thought.
"I've got a sort of idea," said Pooh at last, "but I don't suppose it's a very good one."
I don't suppose it is either, said Eeyore.
"Go on, Pooh," said Rabbit. "Let's have it."
"Well, if we all threw stones and things into the river on one side of Eeyore, the stones would make waves, and the waves would wash them to the other side."
"That's a very good idea," said Rabbit,
and Pooh looked happy again.
Very, said Eeyore. When I want to be washed, Pooh, I shall let you know.
"Supposing we hit him by mistake," said Piglet anxiously.
Or supposing you missed him by mistake, said Eeyore. Think of all the possibilities, Piglet, before you settle down to enjoy yourselves.
But Pooh had got the biggest stone he could carry, and was leaning over the bridge, holding it in his paws.
"I'm not throwing it, I'm dropping it, Eeyore," he explained. "Then I can't miss. I can't hit you. Could you stop turning round for a moment, because it muddles me rather?"
No, said Eeyore. I like turning round.
Rabbit began to feel that this was time he took command.
"Now, Pooh," he said, "when I say now, you can drop it. Eeyore, when I say now, Pooh will drop his stone."
Thank you very much, Rabbit, but I expect I shall know.
"Are you ready, Pooh? Piglet, give Pooh a little more room. Get back a bit there, Pooh. Are you ready?"
No, said Eeyore.
"No," said Rabbit.
Pooh dropped his stone. There was a loud splash, and Eeyore disappeared. It was an anxious moment for the watchers on the bridge. They looked and looked, and even the sight of Piglet's stick coming out a little in front of Rabbit's didn't cheer them up as much as you would have expected. And then, just as Pooh was beginning to think that he must have chosen the wrong stone or the wrong river or the wrong day for his idea, something grey showed for a moment by the river bank, and it slowly got bigger and bigger, and at last it was Eeyore coming out. With a shout, they rushed off the bridge and pushed and pulled at him, and soon he was standing among them again on dry land.
"Ah, Eeyore, you are wet," said Piglet, feeling him.
Eeyore shook himself and asked somebody to explain to Piglet what happened when you had been inside a river for quite a long time.
"Well done, Pooh," said Rabbit kindly. "That was a good idea of ours."
What was? Asked Eeyore.
"Pushing you to the bank like that."
Pushing me?
Said Eeyore in surprise.
Pushing me? You didn't think I was hushed, did you? I dived. Pooh dropped a large stone on me, and so as not to be struck heavily on the chest, I dived and swam to the bank.
You didn't really, whispered Piglet to Pooh, so as to comfort him.
"I didn't think I did," said Pooh anxiously. "It's just Eeyore," said Piglet. "I thought your idea was a very good idea."
Pooh began to feel a little more comfortable, because when you are a bear of very little brain and you think of things, you find sometimes that a thing which seemed very thingish inside you is quite different when it gets out into the open and has other people looking at it. And anyhow, Eeyore was in the river, and now he wasn't, so he hadn't done any harm.
"How did you fall in, Eeyore?"
asked Rabbit as he dried him with Piglet's handkerchief.
I didn't, said Eeyore.
"But how?"
I was bounced, said Eeyore.
"Oh," said Roo excitedly. Did somebody push you?
Somebody bounced me. I was just thinking by the side of the river, thinking, if any of you know what that means, when I received a loud bounce.
"Oh, Eeyore," said everybody. "Are you sure you didn't slip?" asked Rabbit wisely.
Of course I slipped. If you're standing on the slippery bank of a river and somebody bounces you loudly from behind, you slip. What did you think I did?
But who did it?
asked Roo. Eeyore didn't answer. I expect it was Tigger," said Piglet nervously.
But Eeyore, said Pooh, was it a joke or an accident?
I didn't stop to ask, Pooh. Even at the very bottom of the river I didn't stop to say to myself, is this a hearty joke, or is it the merest accident? I just floated to the surface and said to myself, it's wet, if you know what I mean.
"Where was Tigger?" asked Rabbit. Before Eeyore could answer, there was a loud noise behind them, and through a hedge came Tigger himself.
"Hello, everybody,"
said Tigger cheerfully.
Hello, Tigger, said
Roo. Rabbit became very important suddenly. "Tigger," he said, "what happened just now?"
"Just then,"
said Tigger a little uncomfortably. "When you bounced Eeyore into the river."
"I didn't bounce him."
You bounced me, said Eeyore gruffly.
"I didn't really. I had a cough, and I happened to be behind Eeyore, and I said,
"Why?" said Rabbit, helping Piglet up and dusting him. "It's all right, Piglet."
"It took me by surprise," said Piglet nervously.
That's what I call bouncing, said Eeyore. Taking people by surprise. Very unpleasant habit. I don't mind Tigger being in the forest, he went on, because it's a large forest, and there's plenty of room to bounce in it. But I don't see why he should come into my little corner of it and bounce there. It isn't as if there was anything very wonderful about my little corner. Of course, for people who like cold, wet, ugly bits, it is something rather special. But otherwise it's just a corner, and if anybody feels bouncy—
"I didn't bounce. I coughed,"
said Tigger crossly.
Bouncy or coffee, it's all the same at the bottom of the river.
"Well," said Rabbit, "all I can say is, well, here's Christopher Robin, so he can say it." Christopher Robin came down from the forest to the bridge, feeling all sunny and careless, and just as if twice 19 didn't matter a bit, as it didn't on such a happy afternoon, and he thought that if he stood on the bottom rail of the bridge and leant over and watched the river slipping slowly away beneath him, then he would suddenly know everything that there was to be known, and he would be able to tell Pooh, who wasn't quite sure about some of it. But when he got to the bridge and saw all the animals there, then he knew that it wasn't that kind of afternoon, but the other kind, when you wanted to do something. "It's like this, Christopher Robin," began Rabbit. "Tigger—"
"No, I didn't,"
said Tigger.
Well, anyhow, there I was, said Eeyore.
But I don't think he meant to,
said Pooh.
"He just is bouncy,"
said Piglet.
"and he can't help it."
"Try bouncing me, Tigger," said Roo eagerly. "Eeyore, Tigger's going to try me. Piglet, do you think—" "Yes, yes," said Rabbit. "We don't all want to speak at once. The point is, what does Christopher Robin think about it?"
"All I did was I coughed,"
said Tigger.
He bounced, said Eeyore.
"Well, I sort of balked,"
said Tigger. "Hush," said Rabbit, holding up his paw. "What does Christopher Robin think about it all? That's the point." "Well," said Christopher Robin, not quite sure what it was all about, "I think—" "Yes," said everybody. "I think we all ought to play Poohsticks." So they did. And Eeyore, who had never played it before, won more times than anybody else, and Roo fell in twice, the first time by accident and the second time on purpose, because he suddenly saw Kanga coming from the forest, and he knew he'd have to go to bed anyhow. So then Rabbit said he'd go with them, and Tigger and Eeyore went off together, because Eeyore wanted to tell Tigger how to win at Poohsticks, which you do by letting your stick drop in a twitchy sort of way, if you understand what I mean, Tigger. And Christopher Robin and Pooh and Piglet were left on the bridge by themselves. For a long time they looked at the river beneath them, saying nothing. And the river said nothing too, for it felt very quiet and peaceful on this summer afternoon.
"Tigger is all right, really," said Piglet lazily.
"Of course he is," said Christopher Robin.
"Everybody is really," said Pooh. "That's what I think," said Pooh. "But I don't suppose I'm right," he said.
"Of course you are," said Christopher Robin. In which Piglet does a very grand thing. Halfway between Pooh's house and Piglet's house was a thoughtful spot where they met sometimes when they had decided to go and see each other. And as it was warm and out of the wind, they would sit down there for a little and wonder what they would do now that they had seen each other. One day, when they decided not to do anything, Pooh made up a verse about it so that everybody should know what the place was for.
"This warm and sunny spot belongs to Pooh, and here he wonders what he's going to do. But I forgot, it's Piglet's too."
Now one autumn morning, when the wind had blown all the leaves off the trees in the night and was trying to blow the branches off, Pooh and Piglet were sitting in the thoughtful spot and wondering.
"What I think," said Pooh, "is I think we'll go to Pooh Corner and see Eeyore, because perhaps his house has been blown down, and perhaps he'd like us to build it again."
"What I think," said Piglet, "is I think we'll go and see Christopher Robin, only he won't be there, so we can't."
"Let's go and see everybody," said Pooh, "because when you've been walking in the wind for miles and you suddenly go into somebody's house and he says, 'Hello, Pooh, you're just in time for a little smackerel of something,' and you are, then it's what I call a friendly day."
Piglet thought that they ought to have a reason for going to see everybody, like looking for small or organising exploitation, if Pooh could think of something. Pooh could.
"We'll go because it's Thursday," he said, "and we'll go to wish everybody a very happy Thursday. Come on, Piglet."
They got up, and when Piglet had sat down again, because he didn't know the wind was so strong and had been helped up by Pooh, they started off. They went to Pooh's house first, and luckily Pooh was at home just as they got there, so he asked them in, and they had some. And then they went on to Kanga's house, holding on to each other, shouting,
"Isn't it?" and "What?" and
"I can't hear."
But the time they got to Kanga's house, they were so buffeted that they had to stay to lunch. Just at first it seemed rather cold outside afterwards, so they pushed on to Rabbit's as quickly as they could.
"We've come to wish you a very happy Thursday,"
said Pooh, when he had gone in and out once or twice just to make sure that he could get out again.
"Why, what's going to happen on Thursday?"
asked Rabbit, and when Pooh had explained, and Rabbit, whose life was made up of important things, said, "I thought to really come about something." They sat down for a little, and by, Pooh and Piglet went on again. The wind was behind them now, so they didn't have to shout.
"Rabbit's clever," said Pooh thoughtfully.
"Yes," said Piglet, "Rabbit's clever."
"And he has brain."
"Yes," said Piglet, "Rabbit has brain."
There was a long silence.
"I suppose," said Pooh, that's why he never understands anything."
Christopher Robin was at home by this time, because it was the afternoon, and he was so glad to see them that they stayed there until very nearly tea-time. And then they had a very nearly tea, which is one you forget about afterwards, and hurried on to Pooh Corner so as to see Eeyore before it was too late to have a proper tea with Owl.
"Hello, Eeyore,"
they called out cheerfully.
"Oh," said Eeyore, "lost your way?"
"We just came to see you," said Piglet, "and to see how your house was. Look, Pooh, it's still standing."
"I know," said Eeyore. "Very odd. Somebody ought to have come down and pushed it over."
"We wondered whether the wind would blow it down," said Pooh.
"Ah, that's why nobody's bothered, I suppose. I thought perhaps they'd forgotten."
Well, we're very glad to see you, Eeyore. Now we're going on to see Owl.
That's right. You'll like Owl. He flew past a day or two ago and noticed me. Didn't actually say anything, mind you, but he knew it was me. Very friendly of him, I thought. Encouraging.
Pooh and Piglet shuffled about a little and said,
Well, goodbye, Eeyore.
as lingeringly as they could, but they had a long way to go and wanted to be getting on.
Goodbye, said Eeyore. Mind you don't get blown away, little Piglet. You'll be missed. People would say, where's little Piglet been blown to? Really wanting to know. Well, goodbye, and thank you for happening to pass me.
Goodbye,
said Pooh and Piglet for the last time, and they pushed on to Owl's house. The wind was against them now, and Piglet's ears streamed behind him like banners as he fought his way along. And it seemed hours before he got them into the shelter of the 100 Acre Wood, and they stood up straight again to listen, a little nervously, to the roaring of the gale among the tree-tops.
Supposing a tree fell down, Pooh, when we were underneath it?
Supposing it didn't,
said Pooh after careful thought. Piglet was comforted by this, and in a little while they were knocking and ringing very cheerfully at Owl's door.
Hello, Owl, said Pooh. I hope we're not too late for, how are you, Owl? Piglet and I just came to see how you are, because it's Thursday.
Sit down, Pooh. Sit down, Piglet,
said Owl kindly.
and make yourselves comfortable.
They thanked him and made themselves as comfortable as they could.
Because, you see, Owl,
said Pooh,
we've been hurrying so as to be in time for, so as to see you before we went away again.
Owl nodded solemnly.
Correct me if I'm wrong, he said, but am I right in supposing that it is a very blusterous day outside?
Very, said Piglet, who was quietly thawing his ears and wishing that he was safely back in his own house.
I thought so, said Owl. It was on just such a blusterous day as this that my Uncle Robert, a portrait of whom you see upon the wall on your right, Piglet, while returning in the late afternoon from a... What's that?
There was a loud, cracking noise.
Look out, cried Pooh. Mind the clock, out the way, Piglet, I'm falling on you, help, cried Piglet.
Pooh's side of the room was slowly tilting upwards, and his chair began sliding down on Piglet's. The clock slithered gently along the mantelpiece, collecting vases on the way until they all crashed together on what had once been the floor, but now was trying to see what it looked like as a wall. Uncle Robert, who was going to be the new hearthrug and was bringing the rest of his wall with him as carpet, met Piglet's chair just as Piglet was expecting to leave it, and for a little while it became very difficult to remember which was really the north. Then there was another loud crack. Owl's room collected itself feverishly, and there was silence. In the corner of the room, the tablecloth began to wriggle. Then it wrapped itself into a ball and rolled across the room. Then it jumped up and down once or twice and put out two ears. It rolled across the room again and unwound itself.
Pooh, said Piglet nervously.
Yes,
said one of the chairs.
Where are we?
I'm not quite sure, said the chair.
Are we in Owl's house?
I think so, because we were just going to have tea and we hadn't had it.
Oh,
said Piglet.
Well,
did Owl always have a letterbox in his ceiling?
has he?
Yes, look.
I can't, said Pooh. I'm face downwards under something, and that, Piglet, is a very bad position for looking at ceilings.
Well, he has, Pooh.
Perhaps he's changed it, said Pooh, just for a change.
There was a disturbance behind the table in the other corner of the room, and Owl was with them again.
"Oh, Piglet," said Owl, looking very much annoyed. Where's Pooh?"
"Not quite sure,"
said Pooh. Owl turned at his voice and frowned at as much of Pooh as he could see.
"Pooh,"
said Owl severely,
"did you do that?"
"No," said Pooh humbly. "I don't think so."
"Then who did?"
"I think it was the wind," said Piglet. "I think your house is blown down."
"Oh, is that it? I thought it was Pooh."
"No," said Pooh.
"If it was the wind," said Owl, considering the matter, "then it wasn't Pooh's fault. No blame can be attached to him."
With these kind words he flew up to look at his new ceiling.
"Piglet!"
called Pooh in a loud whisper. Piglet leant down to him.
"Yes, Pooh." "What did he say was attached to me?" "He said he didn't blame you." "Oh, I thought he meant, oh, I see." "Owl," said Piglet, "come down and help Pooh."
Owl, who was admiring his letterbox, flew down again. Together they pushed and pulled at the armchair, and in a little while Pooh came out from underneath and was able to look round him again.
"Oh, well,"
said Owl.
"This is a nice state of things."
"What are we going to do, Pooh? Can you think of anything?"
asked Piglet.
"Well, I had just sort of something," said Pooh. "It was just a little thing I thought of."
And he began to sing.
"I lay on my chest, and I thought it best to pretend I was having an evening rest. I lay on my tum, and I tried to hum, but nothing particular seemed to
My face was flat on the floor, and that is all very well for an acrobat, but it doesn't seem fair to a friendly bear to stiffen him out with a basket chair. And a sort of squoze which grows and grows is not too nice for his poor old nose, and a sort of squash is much too much for his neck and his mouth and his ears and such.
That was all, said Pooh. Owl coughed in an unadmiring sort of way and said that if Pooh was sure that was all, they could now give their minds to the problem of escape.
"Because," said Owl, "we can't go out by what used to be the front door. Something's fallen on it."
"But how else can you go out?" asked Piglet anxiously.
That is the problem, Piglet, to which I am asking Pooh to give his mind."
Pooh sat on the floor, which had once been a wall, and gazed up at the ceiling, which had once been another wall, with a front door in it, which had once been a front door, and tried to give his mind to it.
Could you fly up to the letterbox with Piglet on your back?" he asked.
"No," said Piglet quickly, "he couldn't." Owl explained about the necessary dorsal muscles. He'd explained this to Pooh and Christopher Robin once before, and had been waiting ever since for a chance to do it again, because it is a thing which you can easily explain twice before anybody knows what you're talking about.
"Because you see, Owl, if we could get Piglet into the letterbox, he might squeeze through the place where the letters come and climb down the tree and run for help."
Piglet said hurriedly that he had been getting bigger lately and couldn't possibly, much as he would like to. And Owl said that he had his letterbox made bigger lately in case he got bigger letters, so perhaps Piglet might. And Piglet said, "But you said the necessary you-know-whats wouldn't." And Owl said,
"No, they won't, so it's no good thinking about it."
And Piglet said, "Then we better think of something else," and began to at once. But Pooh's mind had gone back to the day when he had saved Piglet from the flood, and everybody had admired him so much. And as that didn't often happen, he thought he would like it to happen again. And suddenly, just as it had come before, an idea came to him.
"Owl," said Pooh, "I've thought of something."
"A stout and helpful bear," said Owl.
Pooh looked very proud at being called a stout and helpful bear, and said modestly that he just happened to think of it. You tied a piece of string to Piglet, and you flew up to the letterbox with the other end in your beak, and you pushed it through the wire and brought it down to the floor, and you and Pooh pulled hard at this end, and Piglet went slowly up at the other end. And there you were.
"And there Piglet is," said Owl, "if the string doesn't break."
"Supposing it does?" asked Piglet, really wanting to know.
"Then we try another piece of string."
This was not very comforting to Piglet, because however many pieces of string they tried pulling up with, it would always be the same hymn coming down. But still, it did seem the only thing to do. So, with one last look back in his mind at all the happy hours he had spent in the forest, not being pulled up to the ceiling by a piece of string, Piglet nodded bravely at Pooh and said that it was a very clever plan. "It won't break," whispered Pooh comfortingly, "because you're a small animal, and I'll stand underneath, and if you save us all, it will be a very grand thing to talk about afterwards, and perhaps I'll make up a song, and people will say it was so grand what Piglet did that a respectful Pooh song was made about it." Piglet felt much better after this, and when everything was ready and he found himself slowly going up to the ceiling, he was so proud that he could have called out, "Look at me!" if he hadn't been afraid that Pooh and Owl would let go of their end of the string and look at him.
"Up we go," said Pooh cheerfully.
"The ascent is proceeding as expected," said Owl helpfully.
Soon it was over. Piglet opened the letterbox and climbed in. Then, having untied himself, he began to squeeze into the slit, through which, in the old days when front doors were front doors, many an unexpected letter that Wall had written to himself had come slipping. He squeezed, and he squoze, and then with one last squuzz, he was out. Happy and excited, he turned round to squeak a last message to the prisoners. "It's all right," he called through the letterbox. "Your tree is blown right over, Owl, and there's a branch across the door by Christopher Robin, and I can move it, and we'll bring a rope for Pooh, and I'll go and tell him now, and I can climb down quite easily. I mean, it's dangerous, but I can do it all right, and Christopher Robin and I will be back in about half an hour. Goodbye, Pooh." And without waiting to hear Pooh's answering goodbye and thank you, Piglet, he was off.
"Half an hour,"
said Owl, settling himself comfortably.
"That will just give me time to finish that story I was telling you about my Uncle Robert, a portrait of whom you see underneath you. Now, let me see, where was I? Oh, yes. It was on just such a blusterous day as this that my Uncle Robert—"
Pooh closed his eyes. In which Eeyore finds the Wolery, and Owl moves into it. Pooh had wandered into the 100 Acre Wood, and was standing in front of what had once been Owl's house. It didn't look at all like a house now. It looked like a tree which had been blown down, and as soon as a house looks like that, it's time you tried to find another one. Pooh had had a mysterious message underneath his front door that morning, saying,
"I'm sketching for a new house for Owl.
So would you. Rabbit. And while he was wondering what it meant, Rabbit had come in and read it for him. I'm leaving one for all the others, said Rabbit, and telling them what it means, and they're all searched too. In a hurry, goodbye. And he had run off. Pooh followed slowly. He had something better to do than find a new house for Owl. He had to make up a Pooh song about the old one, because he had promised Piglet days and days ago that he would, and whenever he and Piglet had met since, Piglet didn't actually say anything, but you knew at once why he didn't. And if anybody mentioned hums, or trees, or string, or storms in the night, Piglet's nose went all pink at the tip, and he talked about something quite different in a hurried sort of way.
But it isn't easy, said Pooh to himself as he looked at what had once been Owl's house, because poetry and hums aren't things which you get, they're things which get you. And all you can do is to go where they can find you.
He waited hopefully.
Well, said Pooh after a long wait, I shall begin, here lies a tree, because it does, and then I'll see what happens.
This is what happened.
Here lies a tree which Owl abode was fond of when it stood on end, and Owl was talking to a friend called me, in case you hadn't heard, when something occurred. For lo, a wind was boisterous and flattened out his favourite tree, and things looked bad for him, and we looked bad, I mean, for he and us. I've never known them worse. The piglet thought a thing, courage, he said, there's always hope. I want a thinnish piece of rope, or if there isn't any, bring a thickish piece of string. So to the letterbox he rose, where Pooh and Owl said ho and hum, and where the letters always come, called letters only, Piglet squoze his head and then his toes. Oh, gallant Piglet, Piglet, oh, did Piglet tremble? Did he blinch? No, no, he struggled inch by inch, the letters only, as I know, because I saw him go. He ran, and then he stood and shouted help for Owl abud and Pooh above, till he had the others coming through the wood as quickly as they could. Help, help, and rescue, Piglet cried, and showed the others where to go. Sing ho for Piglet, a Piglet ho, and soon the door was open wide, and we were both outside. Sing ho for Piglet ho, So there it is, said Pooh when he had sung this to himself 3 times. It's come different what I thought it would, but it's come. Now I must go and sing it to Piglet.
I am sketching for a new house for Owl. So adieu, Rabbit."
"What's all this?" said Eeyore.
Rabbit explained.
"What's the matter with his old house?"
Rabbit explained.
"Nobody tells me," said Eeyore. "Nobody keeps me informed. I make it 17 days come Friday since anybody spoke to me."
"It certainly isn't 17 days.
"Come Friday," explained Eeyore.
"And today's Saturday," said Rabbit, "so that would make it 11 days. And as I was here myself a week ago—"
"Not conversing," said Eeyore. "Not first one and then the other. You said, 'Hello,' and flashed past. I saw your tail 100 yards up the hill as I was meditating my reply, and I had thought of saying, 'What?' But of course it was then too late."
"Well, I was in a hurry."
"No give and take," Eeyore went on. "No exchange of thought. Hello, what? I mean, it gets you nowhere, particularly if the other person's tail is only just in sight for the second half of the conversation."
"It's your fault, Eeyore. You've never been to see any of us. You just stay here in this one corner of the forest waiting for the others to come to you. Why don't you go to them sometimes?"
Eeyore was silent for a little while, thinking. "There may be something in what you say, Rabbit," he said at last. "I've been neglecting you. I must move about more. I must come and go."
"That's right, Eeyore. Drop in on any of us any time when you feel like it."
"Thank you, Rabbit. And if anybody says in a loud voice, 'Bother, it's Eeyore,' I can drop out again."
Rabbit stood on one leg for a moment. "Well," he said, "I must be going. Rather busy this morning."
"Goodbye," said Eeyore.
"What? Oh, goodbye. And if you happen to come across a good house for Owl, you must let us know."
"I will give my mind to it," said Eeyore.
Rabbit went. Pooh had found Piglet, and they were walking back to the 100 Acre Wood together.
"Piglet,"
said Pooh a little shyly after they'd walked for some time without saying anything.
"Yes, Pooh? Do you remember when I said that a respectful Pooh song might be written about you-know-what?" "Did you, Pooh?" said Piglet, getting a little pink round the nose. "Oh, yes, I believe you did."
"It's been written, Piglet." The pink went slowly up Piglet's nose to his ears and settled there.
"Has it, Pooh?" he asked huskily. About that time when... Do you mean really written?"
"Yes, Piglet."
The tips of Piglet's ears glowed suddenly. He tried to say something, but even after he had husked once or twice, nothing came out. So Pooh went on.
"There were 7 verses in it."
"7,"
said Piglet, as carelessly as he could. "You don't often get 7 verses in a hum, do you, Pooh?"
"Never,"
said Pooh. "I don't suppose it's ever been heard of before." Do the others know yet?" asked Piglet, stopping for a moment to pick up a stick and throw it away.
"No," said Pooh, "and I wondered which you would like best, for me to hum it now, or to wait until we find the others, and then hum it to all of you."
Piglet thought for a little.
"I think what I'd like best, Pooh, is I'd like you to hum it to me now, and then to hum it to all of us, because then everybody would hear it, but I could say, 'Oh, yes, Pooh's told me,' and pretend not to be listening."
So Pooh hummed it to him, all the 7 verses, and Piglet said nothing, but just stood and glowed, for never before had anyone sung Ho for Piglet. Piglet, ho, all by himself. When it was over, he wanted to ask for one of the verses over again, but he didn't quite like to. It was the verse beginning, "Oh, gallant Piglet," and it seemed to him a very thoughtful way of beginning a piece of poetry.
"Did I really do all that?" he said at last.
"Well," said Pooh, "in poetry, in a piece of poetry, well, you did it, Piglet, because the poetry said you did, and that's how people know."
"Oh," said Piglet, "because I thought I did blinch a little, just at first, and it says, 'Did he blinch?' No, no, that's why."
"You only blinched inside," said Pooh, "and that's the bravest way for a very small animal not to blinch that there is."
Piglet sighed with happiness and began to think about himself. He was brave. When they got to Owl's old house, they found everybody else there except Eeyore. Christopher Robin was telling them what to do, and Rabbit was telling them again directly afterwards in case they hadn't heard, and then they were all doing it. They had got a rope and were pulling Owl's chairs and pictures and things out of his old house so as to be ready to put them into his new one. Kanga was down below tying the things on and calling out to Owl, "You won't want this dirty old dishcloth any more, will you? And what about this carpet? It's all holes." And Owl was calling back indignantly,
"Of course I do. It's just a question of arranging the furniture properly, and it isn't a dishcloth. It's my shawl."
Every now and then Roo fell in and came back on the rope with the next article, which flustered Kanga a little because she never knew where to look for him. So she got cross with Owl and said that his house was a disgrace, all damp and dirty, and that it was quite time it did tumble down. Look at that horrid bunch of toadstools growing out of the corner there. So Owl looked down, a little surprised because he didn't know about this, and then gave a short, sarcastic laugh and explained that this was his sponge, and that if people didn't know a perfectly ordinary bath sponge when they saw it, things were coming to a pretty pass. "Well," said Kanga, and Roo fell in quickly, crying, "I must see Owl's sponge. Oh, there it is. Oh, Owl! Owl, it isn't a sponge, it's a spudge. Do you know what a spudge is, Owl? It's when your sponge gets all—" And Kanga said, "Roo dear," very quickly, because that's not the way to talk to anybody who can spell Tuesday. But they were all quite happy when Pooh and Piglet came along, and they stopped working in order to have a little rest and listen to Pooh's new song. So then they all told Pooh how good it was, and Piglet said carelessly, "It is good, isn't it? I mean, as a song."
"What about the new house?" asked Pooh. "Have you found it, Owl?"
"He's found a name for it," said Christopher Robin, lazily nibbling at a piece of grass. "So now all he wants is the house."
"I am calling it this,"
said Owl importantly, and he showed them what he'd been making. It was a square piece of board with the name of the house painted on it. The Wolery. It was at this exciting moment that something came through the trees and bumped into Owl. The board fell to the ground, and Piglet and Roo bent over it eagerly.
"Oh, it's you,"
said Owl crossly.
"Hello, Eeyore," said Rabbit. "Oh, there you are. Where have you been?"
Eeyore took no notice of them.
"Good morning, Christopher Robin," he said, brushing away Roo and Piglet and sitting down on the Wolery. "Are we alone?"
"Yes," said Christopher Robin, smiling to himself.
"I've been told the news has worked through to my corner of the forest, the damp bit down on the right which nobody wants, that a certain person is looking for a house. I've found one for him."
"Ah, well done," said Rabbit kindly. Eeyore looked round slowly at him, and then turned back to Christopher Robin.
"We have been joined by something," he said in a loud whisper. "But no matter, we can leave it behind. If you will come with me, Christopher Robin, I will show you the house."
Christopher Robin jumped up. "Come on, Pooh," he said.
"Come on, Tigger," cried
Roo.
"Shall we go, Owl?"
said Rabbit.
"Wait a moment,"
said Owl, picking up his notice board, which had just come into sight again. Eeyore waved them back.
"Christopher Robin and I are going for a short walk," he said. "Not a jostle. If he likes to bring Pooh and Piglet with him, I shall be glad of their company, but one must be able to breathe."
"That's all right," said Rabbit, rather glad to be left in charge of something. "We'll go on getting the things out. Now then, Tigger, where's that rope? What's the matter, Owl?" Owl who had just discovered that his new address was The Smear, coughed at Eeyore sternly, but said nothing, and Eeyore, with most of the Wolery behind him, marched off with his friends. So in a little while they came to the house which Eeyore had found. Just before they came to it, Piglet was nudging Pooh, and Pooh was nudging Piglet, and they were saying,
"It is, and it can't be, and it is really,"
to each other. And when they got there, it really was.
"There,"
said Eeyore proudly, stopping them outside Piglet's house.
"And the name on it, and everything."
"Oh!" cried Christopher Robin, wondering whether to laugh or not.
"Just the house for Owl, don't you think so, little Piglet?"
Then Piglet did a noble thing. He did it in a sort of dream while he was thinking of all the wonderful words Pooh had hummed about him.
"Yes, it's just the house for Owl," he said grandly, "and I hope he'll be very happy in it."
Then he gulped twice, because he had been very happy in it himself.
"What do you think, Christopher Robin?"
asked Eeyore a little anxiously, feeling that something wasn't quite right. Christopher Robin had a question to ask first, and he was wondering how to ask it. "Well," he said at last, "it's a very nice house, and if your own house is blown down, you must go somewhere else, mustn't you, Piglet? What would you do if your house was blown down?" Before Piglet could think, Pooh answered for him.
"You'd come and live with me," said Pooh. "Wouldn't you, Piglet?"
Piglet squeezed his paw.
"Thank you, Pooh," he said. "I should love to."
In which Christopher Robin and Pooh come to an enchanted place, and we leave them there. Christopher Robin was going away. Nobody knew why he was going. Nobody knew where he was going. Indeed, nobody even knew why he knew that Christopher Robin was going away. But somehow or other, everybody in the forest felt that it was happening at last. Even the smallest of all, a friend and relation of Rabbit's, who thought he had once seen Christopher Robin's foot, but couldn't be quite sure because perhaps it was something else. Even S of A told himself that things were going to be different. And late and early, two other friends and relations said, "Well, early," and "Well, late," to each other in such a hopeless sort of way that it really didn't seem any good waiting for the answer. One day, when he felt that he couldn't wait any longer, Rabbit brained out a notice, and this is what it said. "Notice, a meeting of everybody will meet at the house at Pooh Corner to pass a resolution. By order, keep to the left, signed Rabbit." He had to write this out 2 or 3 times before he could get the resolution to look like what he thought it was going to when he began to spell it. But when at last it was finished, he took it round to everybody and read it out to them, and they all said they would come.
"Well,"
said Eeyore that afternoon when he saw them all walking up to his house,
"this is a surprise. Am I asked too?"
"Don't mind Eeyore," whispered Rabbit to Pooh. "I told him all about it this morning."
Everybody said, "How do you do?" to Eeyore, and Eeyore said that he didn't, not to notice, and then they sat down. And as soon as they were all sitting down, Rabbit stood up again.
"We all know why we're here," he said, "but I have asked my friend Eeyore."
"That's me," said Eeyore. "Grand."
"I have asked him to propose a resolution."
And he sat down again.
"Now then, Eeyore," he said.
"Don't bustle me," said Eeyore, getting up slowly. "Don't now then me."
He took a piece of paper from behind his ear and unfolded it.
"Nobody knows anything about this," he went on. "This is a surprise."
He coughed in an important way and began again.
"What nots and et ceteras before I begin. Or, perhaps I should say, before I end, I have a piece of poetry to read to you. Hitherto, a long word meaning, well, you'll see what it means directly. Hitherto, as I was saying, all the poetry in the forest has been written by Pooh, a bear with a pleasing manner, but a positively startling lack of brain. The poem, which I am now about to read to you, was written by Eeyore, or myself, in a quiet moment. If somebody will take Roo's bullseye away from him and wake up Owl, we shall all be able to enjoy it. I call it Poem. This was it. Christopher Robin is going, at least I think he is, where nobody knows, but he is going, I mean he goes, to rhyme with nose. Do we care? To rhyme with where? We do, very much. I haven't got a rhyme for that, is in the second line yet. Bother. No, I haven't got a rhyme for bother. Bother. Those two bothers will have to rhyme with each other. Bother. The fact is, this is more difficult than I thought I ought. Very good indeed. I ought to begin again, but it is easier to stop. Christopher Robin, goodbye. Good. I and all your friends all your friend ascend. Very awkward this, it keeps going wrong. Well, anyhow, we send our love. End. If anybody wants to clap, said Eeyore when he had read this, now is the time to do it. They all clapped. Thank you, said Eeyore. Unexpected and gratifying, if a little lacking in smack.
That's much better than mine, said Pooh admiringly, and he really thought it was.
Whoa, explained Eeyore modestly. It was meant to be.
This resolution, said Rabbit, is that we all sign it and take it to Christopher Robin.
So it was signed. Pooh, Wal, Piglet, Eeyore, Rabbit, Kanga. Blot, Smudge. And they all went off to Christopher Robin's house with it. "Hello, everybody," said Christopher Robin. "Hello, Pooh." They all said hello, and felt awkward and unhappy suddenly because it was a sort of goodbye they were saying, and they didn't want to think about it. So they stood around and waited for somebody else to speak, and they nudged each other and said, "Go on," and gradually Eeyore was nudged to the front, and the others crowded behind him. "What is it, Eeyore?" asked Christopher Robin. Eeyore swished his tail from side to side so as to encourage himself and began.
Christopher Robin, he said, we've come to say, to give you, it's called, written by, but we've all, because we've heard, I mean we all know, well, you see, it's, that, to put it as shortly as possible, is what it is.
He turned round angrily on the others and said,
"Everybody crowds round so in this forest. There's no space. I never saw a more spreading lot of animals in my life, and all in the wrong places. Can't you see that Christopher Robin wants to be alone? I'm going." And he humped off.
Not quite knowing why, the others began edging away, and when Christopher Robin had finished reading the poem and was looking up to say thank you, only Pooh was left. "It's a comforting sort of thing to have," said Christopher Robin, folding up the paper and putting it in his pocket. "Come on, Pooh." And he walked off quickly.
"Where are we going?" said Pooh, hurrying after him, and wondering whether it was to be an explore, or what shall I do about you-know-what. "Where?" said Christopher Robin. So they began going there, and after they'd walked a little way, Christopher Robin said, "What do you like doing best in the world, Pooh?"
Well, said Pooh, what I like best.
And then he had to stop and think, because although eating honey was a very good thing to do, there was a moment just before you began to eat it, which was better than when you were, but he didn't know what it was called. And then he thought that being with Christopher Robin was a very good thing to do, and having Piglet near was a very friendly thing to have. And so, when he had thought it all out, he said,
"What I like best in the whole world is me and Piglet going to see you, and you saying, 'What about a little something?' and me saying, 'Well, I shouldn't mind a little something, should you, Piglet?' And it being a hummy sort of day outside, and birds singing."
"I like that too," said Christopher Robin, "but what I like doing best is nothing."
"How do you do nothing?"
asked Pooh after he'd wondered for a long time.
"Well, it's when people call out at you just as you're going off to do it. 'What are you going to do, Christopher Robin?' And you say, 'Oh, nothing.' And then you go and do it." "Oh, I see," said Pooh. "This is a nothing sort of thing that we're doing now."
"Oh, I see,"
said Pooh again. "It means just going along, listening to all the things you can't hear and not bothering."
"Oh,"
said Pooh. They walked on, thinking of this and that, and by they came to an enchanted place on the very top of the forest called Galleon's Lap, which is 60-something trees in a circle. And Christopher Robin knew that it was enchanted because nobody had ever been able to count whether it was 63 or 64, not even when he tied a piece of string round each tree after he had counted it. Being enchanted, its floor was not like the floor of the forest, gorse and bracken and heather, but close-set grass, quiet and smooth and green. It was the only place in the forest where you could sit down carelessly without getting up again almost at once and looking for somewhere else. Sitting there, they could see the whole world spread out until it reached the sky, and whatever there was all the world over was with them in Galleon's Lap. Suddenly Christopher Robin began to tell Pooh about some of the things. People called kings and queens, and something called factors, and a place called Europe, and an island in the middle of the sea where no ships came, and how you make a suction pump, if you want to, and when knights were knighted, and what comes from Brazil. And Pooh, his back against one of the 60-something trees, and his paws folded in front of him, said,
"Oh," and "I don't know,"
and thought how wonderful it would be to have a real brain which could tell you things. And by Christopher Robin came to an end of the things, and was silent, and he sat there looking out over the world, and wishing it wouldn't stop. But Pooh was thinking too, and he said suddenly to Christopher Robin,
"Is it a very grand thing to be an afternoon, what you said?"
"Oh, what?" said Christopher Robin lazily as he listened to something else.
"On a horse,"
explained Pooh. "A knight?"
"Oh, was that it?" said Pooh. "I thought it was is it as grand as a king and factors and all the other things you said?"
"Well, it's not as grand as a king," said Christopher Robin, and then as Pooh seemed disappointed, he added quickly, "but it's grander than factors."
"Could a bear be one?"
"Of course he could," said Christopher Robin. "I'll make you one." And he took a stick and touched Pooh on the shoulder and said, "Rise, Sir Pooh the Bear, most faithful of all my knights." So Pooh rose and sat down and said,
"Thank you,"
which is the proper thing to say when you have been made a knight,
and he went into a dream again, in which he and Sir Pump and Sir Brazil and Factors lived together with a horse, and were faithful knights, all except Factors, who looked after the horse, to good King Christopher Robin. And every now and then he shook his head, and he said to himself, "I'm not getting it right." Then he began to think of all the things Christopher Robin would want to tell him when he came back from wherever he was going, and how muddling it would be for a bear of very little brain to try and get them right in his mind.
"So perhaps," he said sadly to himself, "Christopher Robin won't tell me any more."
And he wondered if being a faithful knight meant that you just went on being faithful without being told things. Then suddenly again Christopher Robin, who was still looking at the world with his chin in his hands, called out, "Pooh."
"Yes,"
said Pooh. When Pooh."
"Yes, Christopher Robin."
"I'm not going to do nothing any more."
"Never again?"
"Well, not so much. They don't let you." Pooh waited for him to go on, but he was silent again.
"Yes, Christopher Robin,"
said Pooh helpfully. "Pooh, when I'm when I'm not doing nothing, will you come up here sometimes?"
"Just me?"
"Yes, Pooh."
"Will you be here too?"
"Yes, Pooh, I will be, really. I promise I will be, Pooh."
"That's good,"
said Pooh. "Pooh, promise you won't forget about me ever, not even when I'm 100. Pooh thought for a little while.
"How old shall I be then?"
99. Pooh nodded.
"I promise," he said.
Still with his eyes on the world, Christopher Robin put out a hand and felt for Pooh's paw. "Pooh," said Christopher Robin earnestly, if I'm not quite—" He stopped and tried again. "Pooh, whatever happens, you will understand, won't you?"
"Understand what?"
"Nothing." He laughed and jumped to his feet. "Come on."
"Where?"
said Pooh. "Anywhere," said Christopher Robin. So they went off together. But wherever they go, whatever happens to them on the way, in that enchanted place on the top of the forest, a little boy and his bear will always be playing.